Hello, everybody. My name is Charlie Williams, and our Halfway to Halloween special event continues with our next guest. We're going to have a conversation with Josh Millican. Now, Josh and I first met about 8 years ago when Josh was a reporter for Crypt TV, and he came to our ultra mini budgeted movie, Door to Door. And he couldn't have been kinder or more supportive of our efforts to make that independent film. And we have watched Josh's career flourish through the years and taken great pride in watching him go from freelance journalist to editor-in-chief for 2 years of Dread Central. And now, next month, his first novel, Deeper Than Hell, is coming out. And we're all take great pride in Josh's progress. Of course, we at the Horrific Network take pride and bask in the glory of everybody we have any contact with at all. So it's with great pride that I welcome Josh Millican to Halfway to Halloween. Josh, how are you doing?
Wow, I mean, really humbled by that introduction. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I remember that like it was yesterday, and it was just a real wonderful time in my life as a budding horror journalist. Trying to manifest my dream life as a professional horror nerd, and then through the years, and yeah, it's been the best part of a decade, and
I know.
it's been a ride for sure.
Well, let's talk a minute about really all want to congratulate you on your greatest accomplishment in the last few years. And that's the birth of your son, Leon Ichabod Millican, and your lovely wife, Emma, that I know you're just riding the crest of a wave right now. A beautiful
Really
Santa Cruz wave. So
Yeah.
we're all very, very happy for you, Josh, to see
Well, thank
how
you so
things are
much.
turning out for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like truly a blessed existence. Met my wife and fell in love with her right before the pandemic, and we went on
Oh gosh.
lockdown together, and it just really worked and it clicked. So we decided to elope and relocate to Los Angeles, and it's just been wonderful. And yeah, Leon, little man, is 6 months old, and he's huge. He's wearing clothes for a toddler. He's got 4 teeth.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
it's like
That's
just
great.
happening so fast. But yeah, thank you so
Well,
much. It changes everything.
I was teasing Jimmy before because I said, we're friends on Facebook, obviously, and I see your posts, and they go from totally horror centric posts, and now we're getting the family pictures, and we're all loving it.
It's definitely a change. Yeah, I mean, I've got more followers on Facebook than anywhere. So, and most of them I did get during my horror years. So it's got to be kind of wild for them, PL. But yeah, right now I'm really kind of splitting it. Leaning back into horror because I'm in my pre-release promotional push for my
Yeah.
novel. So I have
Yeah.
been getting back into leaning into horror and getting kind of horrific.
That's super. I have 3 interviews that I'm doing during Halfway to Halloween, and I was looking for a common thread that went through all of them. And doing the research and doing the background on the people I'm going to interview, the one thing I discovered is that we're all monster kids, which is no great surprise. That we all have different backgrounds, but that we fell in love with monsters and horror and sci-fi at an early age. And whereas some people grow out of that, we didn't. We just kept on with it. You've made it a career. I've made it a lifelong interest, something that I'm always going to be involved with at some level. So, like me, I'm ancient. So I'm like a monster kid from the famous Monsters of Filmland days. And those old movies that they used to show, Shock Theater, the local stations would show those on Friday and Saturday night, and I'd stay up late. And I think that's where I learned it, because my mom and we'd stay up late and we'd watch those movies together. What was the genesis of your entry into the world of horror, and how did this rather strange flower bloom?
I think it happened in two phases. I was drawn to horror from childhood, like most of us are, and for me, the horror films really were kind of like dangerous. I would hear about a horror movie, and thinking about it in my head would get me really upset and scared. So it was almost like daring myself to actually watch it. But the crazy thing is, when I would watch a lot of these horror movies, it turned out what I thought in my head was actually worse than what I actually saw. A good example of that is The Exorcist. I was born in 1973, and The Exorcist came out in 1973. So it's literally been like my entire life. And I had just been hearing about it, from the time I can remember hearing about anything. But I didn't watch it until I was around 12 or 13, because I was too scared to watch it. And when I did, I was like, all right, I got this. And after that, it was kind of like, well, let's see. Is there anything that can scare me? Again, The Exorcist, it's not to say that The Exorcist didn't scare me or it didn't, wasn't powerful. It's just, my own horror movie factory studio in my head has always been worse. I don't know if that's true for all horror fans, but not always, but 90% of the time, it's really hard to see something in cinema that really matches the terror of, my own fears, my own imagination left to its own devices,
Oh, exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about. I can remember as a kid watching there's an old movie that, they really hyped, and it was Robot Monster. And if you know Robot Monster, it's probably one of the worst movies ever made. It's always on the top 10 list of the worst movies ever made. And basically, it's this guy supposed to be an invader from Mars or Venus or someplace. And it's this guy dressed in a gorilla suit, and he has a diving helmet on, and he's running through Griffith Park for the entire movie. It's
nice.
Supposedly chasing these people that are the last survivors on Earth. And it scared the crap out of me because I'd already built up such expectation about this. But, you look at it now and it's almost nothing. And it just goes to show you. But I think maybe that's your writer's imagination that does that. Do you think maybe
maybe that could be, I'm a sensitive guy, so I always feel things really deeply. And, when kind of left to my own thoughts and devices, if I don't have facts in front of me, I can just conjure this worst case scenario that, just like I said, is most of the time scarier than anything I've seen in cinema. The second way I kind of came back into horror, because you were asking, how did this flower that is Josh Millican bloom? I got to give it up to Netflix in the very early days, mid 2000s. I was into Netflix when they were still mailing you the DVDs, before everything was streaming. But when Netflix first started streaming and I could just go online and see movies, and I went to the horror section, not only did I see, everything that was familiar, revisit that, but all of a sudden I had access to things that I had never had access to before. And I'm mainly talking about foreign cinema. A lot of the new French Extremity, and, things like Martyrs and Frontiers and Inside. I saw these movies and they were so much more intense and nihilistic than anything I had seen, growing up in any kind of American cinema. And, the selection, it was just so vast. They had all the original 8 movies to die for, all 6 years that it ran. So all 30 some of those movies were on Netflix for me to just see. So I was seeing a lot of indie stuff. I was seeing a lot of foreign stuff, and it was just I was like, well, this is great. And it all started with just a little blog, in I don't know, 2010, and then from there I started hooking up with sites.
I was going to ask you about that. You're one of those people that didn't really wait for the world to give you the opportunity. You started your own movie blog, and you said, I read someplace that you said you didn't care if you had 25 or 35 followers. You were doing what you enjoyed doing. How did
Yeah,
that
well,
blog? Go ahead, Josh.
no, I think I'm answering your question. I got to give credit where credit's due, and that's my ex-wife, because I was married to a woman who didn't like horror at all. Who I couldn't chain down in front of a horror movie. But I would stay up late, watch a movie on Netflix, and it would just blow my mind. And so the next day, instead of making her watch it, I would just tell her the whole story, in words that she could handle hearing. And she said to me, she's like, I'd never want to watch these movies, but I love hearing you talk about it. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
well, so I'll just blog about it. So that's how it started. And from there, obviously gravitated to sites like Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central, and dreamed of one day landing there, and in the meantime to hone my skills, I worked for a handful of other horror websites and just made some great connections, and really built up my skills. And so when I landed at Dread Central, first as a contributor around 2016, eventually just clawed my way into the position of managing editor. And then when the opportunity came to be editor-in-chief, when that position was open, I kind of really demanded that they give me a shot. And I'm really just it was about 2 years, and I just loved it. It was a real sense of self-actualization to be able to make a living just immersed in horror and working with other writers and journalists. It was amazing.
When did you first realize that you were going to be able to make a living doing something like this that you loved?
I mean, man.
Really, I know it's a struggle when you first begin. And like you said, you were doing your own blog, right? So I'm thinking you're doing a lot of freelance and independent, you're submitting stories. And
I had day jobs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had day jobs at first, like we all do, I didn't always look like this. So there was a time when I could work in an office.
Josh, you look great, by the way.
Thanks. I think I look great. It's just
you do.
When I think back on what it took to work in an office environment, it's like The Office. I worked in places like that, and just kind of did blogging and journalism on on the sly. But I got to tell you, man, I've never been able to hold down a job for more than a few years. It seems, God, that sounds terrible.
Is that boredom? Or
I guess. I mean, I would always get really bored, and it was always the same thing. It was always like, Josh, there's not really a problem with the work you're doing. You're just not a good fit, And it was like, okay, And I'm one of these Gen X people where I never wanted to have to be friends with my coworkers, But it seems you work at a place long enough, and people kind of want you to join the club. And time after time, I just kept at the 5-year mark or so, it always just seemed to be a personality conflict, and I'd find myself going somewhere else. Eventually, I was like, I'll try to make it go. So I fired again. It's like, I'll try to make it go doing just horror stuff. I'll try to really hustle, and it took a lot. And in the early days, it was by contributing to anywhere between 3 and 8 different sites to maybe pull in 1,500 to 2,200 in a really good month, so it was tough,
Well, actually, that's not a bad month for most writers. Most writers would, give anything for that. So that's a tribute to you that you were able to work for that many sites and make that kind of money. Because it's always easy to do.
That was the only thing I was really motivated to do, and it's that old adage, when you're doing what you love, you don't work a day in your life. And it's like, I had all these other 9-to-5 jobs, normal jobs, and they were all just mind numbing. But I can work an 80-hour week if I'm writing about horror or editing something that has to do with horror, and it doesn't even really feel like work, So
I was gonna ask you this question later on in the interview, but I'm going to ask it now since you brought it up. in the book On Writing, I think it's called On Writing by Stephen King, where he says his process is he treats it like a job. He gets up in the morning, he works for 5 or 6 hours, and then he's done. He'll put in 5 or 6 hours. Of course, he's so prolific, things seem to just flow out of him. But what is your process? Do you take long breaks? Do you have a regular time when you sit down and write every day, or do you just wait until you get the idea? Do you look for ideas? How does that work for you?
Well, there's kind of two different answers really, because when I was with Dread Central, was kind of like the Stephen King thing, where I would get up in the morning and I'd be immersed in the news of the day, and for the 5 or 6 solid hours I would just like be at the computer, and I wouldn't even really get up, just drinking my coffee and like getting the news out there and responding to emails and things like that. And then I'd take a break, and then I'd get back into it in the mid to late afternoon and work through the evening to make sure that everything had been covered, until the horror sphere, the news sphere just kind of settled for the night. And it's like I never really looked at the clock or the hours, because it was just it was almost, I just loved it so much. This book, Deeper Than Hell, which I'm excited to start talking about, really came about in a really crazy way, because some people, I'm sure, are like, oh wow, Josh stopped working at Dread Central 6 months ago, and now his first novel is about to get published. Did he just crank out this novel in a few months? No, that's not how this happened at all. This novel came about in a very strange and unique way. All right, let me tell you the story. So I saw there was some online magazine that put out this call. What they wanted was some authors to submit ideas for serials, where they wanted people to submit fiction, like 1 chapter a month for 12 months. And at the end of 12 months, they would have the option of putting it together and releasing it as a novel. I thought that's a great idea, because I had attempted writing novels a couple times before, kind of gotten into the weeds on both of them, where they really were just kind of getting out of control. Didn't know what to write and what not to write. But this idea of doing a chapter a month, and they set all these parameters too, like a chapter would be between 2,000 and 5,000 words, and there's 12 chapters total. And I was like, well, I like wrapping my mind around that. So I entered that, contest. I submitted with the log line or something for Deeper Than Hell. And they said, congratulations, you made the semifinals. Now we want you to write a complete first chapter and then give us an outline for what each chapter will be, all the way through to the end. And I'm all, awesome. So then I spent the next month writing the whole first chapter and putting together this whole outline. And, when they asked me to do that, you can really see the whole thing in your mind, So I submit, and I'm waiting. So I didn't get picked, right? It's like, oh, bummer. So, I'm not going to be on this site doing this thing and then have the option where at the end of 12 months, maybe it turns into a real book. But then I was like, I'll just do it myself anyway, because I'd already written the first chapter and I already fleshed it all out in my mind. So I just made the commitment to write a chapter a month within those same parameters, following the outline I had already created. And boom, there it was. Now, this is a while ago. This is like back when Obama was still president. And it was when I was also kind of doing the hustle at a lot of different sites, which is, I think, how I even came across that, because they were going to pay like, $100 per chapter, as you submitted it, so it was like, it was going to be a actual money making thing. And then I just kind of wrote it on spec or whatever. But, by the time I was done, first of all, it took me longer than a year. There were, basically I was able to crank out a chapter every month, really like hold myself to that. But there were some times where it took me 2 or even 3 months to do a chapter, only a few. I'd say I wrote it in about a year and a half. But by the time I was done with that, I was really working enough at Dread Central and some other places where I just kind of put it on the back burner. And then when I became full-time at Dread Central, everything else went on the back burner. I always put my own creative endeavors and my own aspirations, as a content creator or a show host or anything. I always put that secondary to really just putting Dread Central first and foremost. I understood that I represented something so much bigger than me. So then, when I did go on paternity leave, and then I was like, well, I don't really want to get back to that 80-hour week. I've had my tenure, in that arena. And I feel really great about stepping away, at the top of the top of my field, at the top of my game. But,
Sure.
moving forward, and I'll still do journalism, but moving forward, I was like, what am I going to do next? So I put a lot of spears in the fire, and one of them was this old manuscript that I had, because like I said, it's 6 or 7 years old now. And just it got out. So that's a very long answer to your question on my creative process.
No. I'm glad you brought up your book. Now that's Encyclopocalypse, right? Publications.
Yeah. And let me just say a few nice things about them, if I may. Encyclopocalypse is founded by Mark Miller, who used to run Clive Barker's literary imprint, Seraphin. Wow. He really just comes from this really almost horror literature royalty. And Encyclopocalypse, what they do is so amazing, because not only do they release fiction writers like me, they release novelizations, and they release fiction from people who you might normally associate with cinema. They released a novel by Peter Atkins. They released a novella and a collection by Mick Garris. It's like, for me, as a dude who lived film for 10 years, but who has a literary background and who's now getting back into fiction, it's so perfect for me to find a publisher like this. And they've treated me like royalty. A first-time novelist, the support they've given me. They're wonderful.
You mentioned the book by Mick Garris, which I've read. And I've also read a few of Al Goingback's books. And he's also published by Encyclopocalypse.
A lot of big names, A
lot of big names. I mean,
Tom Holland, Brian Yesna, John Penny, Joe R. Lansdale. It's like I'm in such good company. It's really humbling.
Josh. But just, Jimmy did send me the link to an advanced copy of your book.
Read
it? I haven't finished it yet.
Did you get past chapter 3?
I'm trying to think of where I'm about page 50 so far.
Man,
not quite a third of the way through.
Seriously, chapter 3 is like crazy. Anyway, go on.
Oh, well, listen, it is such a fast, fascinating read.
Thank you.
What I was I was anxious. I was hoping I was going to be able to finish by the time we did the interview, and I didn't, but I'm anxious to get back to it after the interview.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what you think.
Well, let me tell you that, some authors take a long time to get into the story, and your story starts on page 1. And I just wondered, was that part of the plan, part of the structure when you were writing it? Did you just want the story to take off, immediately? Because you're with the two characters at the beginning of the story, and then the action begins. There's none of this great big build up to the action taking place. It just immediately starts. And I love that. I absolutely love a story that does that, because sometimes I think, even the best of authors can be guilty of padding a story. So it becomes, the story is good, but it's bloated. And yours is just lean and mean, and I can't recommend it highly enough based on what I've read so far.
Well, thank you. And I'll tell you how I did that. It's not magic. It's my journalism background. So I started in a creative background. See, people who know me from Dread Central and horror don't know that I actually have a degree in creative writing. That I was in some bands, right? And poetry and short fiction and things like that. So I actually came from a creative place. And I know exactly what you're talking about. Remember when I said I had attempted novels a couple times before?
Yeah.
I'm just getting into tens of thousands of words and not really getting to the point, not really seeing a clear way to the end. So, fast forward 10, 15 years, one, it was being told to put it into 12 chapters. It really made me like focus from the get-go. I'd never done that before. I always figured you just start at the beginning, and when you're done, right? I had never imagined every step of the way in the process before. But it's also the journalism, man, because I tell you, even the fact that it sat on a shelf for 6 years, when I did give it a final once-over before I handed it off to Encyclopocalypse, I was still slashing left and right. I was still sharpening and trimming the fat, and that was the journalist in me at that point, where I learned, journalism is about, getting people as interested in possible as quickly as possible. It's all about that hook. And it's not really giving them time to turn the page or click to another station. It's really about keeping them engaged the whole time.
Exactly.
So thank you. I'm glad you felt that way about my work. And I would absolutely say, anyone who's, finds themselves having trouble focusing, as a creative writer, should definitely take up journalism for a year or two. And it'll really teach you how to just focus on what's what.
No, I was a journalism major for a while in college too. So I know exactly what you're talking about: who, what, when, where, why, and how. I mean, it's that where you get to the point, and you're right. You lose your audience if you wait too long to get things going. Now, as far as the publication date, is it set? It's June 18th. Is that when it's available? June 14th. I want to get that date correct.
It'll be available on both Kindle and paperback starting June 14th. You can already pre-order the Kindle. For some reason, you can't pre-order the paperback until I think just the day before or something. But it's on Amazon. And the great thing is that if you just search Deeper Than Hell, you don't even have to go to books. Just search Deeper Than Hell, and it's the #1 entry that comes back. So
yeah, it is. And on Goodreads, even looking it up on Goodreads, I mean, it's got like 5 stars out of all the reviewers, or out all the people that have read it so far.
All the people who have made it past chapter 3.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm nervous about chapter 3, man.
Listen, I did read that you were worried that the book may be too transgressive.
Yeah.
And I thought Josh is worried that it's too transgressive.
I don't know where some of this shit came from, honestly. I just kind of like got in the zone and tried not to self-censor myself while it was actually emerging from my fingertips, then just kind of went back and looked at it. But yeah, I guess one thing I should say is, this book that I made, because of this format they wanted it in, because I imagined it where each chapter would kind of stand alone for a full month, I wanted them all to be kind of self-contained, and I wanted them all to kind of end on a cliffhanger. So because of that, like, a lot of them do have kind of really specific feels. And chapter 3 is the body horror chapter. It's just the no holds barred, the most extreme of Clive Barker and David Cronenberg, human body modification, just no holds barred. And it's intense, man. And I'm worried as a writer, as a first-time novelist, that people are going to, go, oh, chapter 1, cool. Chapter 2, okay, I'm really seeing it. Chapter 3, oh, man. Need to set aside. If you can make it through chapter 3, I won't offend you that hard again until chapter 11. So.
Hey, no problem. There's a generational thing going on here. Obviously, I'm much older than you are. And if I enjoy all kinds, one of the reasons I think I'm still a monster kid is that I've been able to grow as the genre changes, and not just limit myself to like the old Universal movies, which is what I grew up on. But no, I appreciate that kind of horror. I like something that shakes it up a little bit. And so I get the sense that I'm going to be plenty shook up by the time I finish your book. And that's a good thing. So
yeah,
looking forward to it.
My kind of like my introduction to Encyclopocalypse. I don't even know what to call him. Like he's been by my side as like an agent and an editor and a promoter. Sean
Guardian
Durger.
Angel.
Yeah, Sean Durger, who works for Encyclopocalypse, has just been wonderful through this entire process. really helping me every step of the way. And like I said, as a first-time novelist, I really feel like they're treating me like royalty. You hear so many stories about, writers who hand off their manuscript and then don't even get a copy of the book when it comes out. Can't even communicate, don't really get any support. But Sean's just been giving me so much support. One of the things he said about my book, though, which is why it appealed to him, was he said I kind of like broke all the rules, or I didn't abide by any rules. And I kind of like that as a description of Deeper Than Hell as well, because you can get really kind of caught up in trying to like abide by a specific genre or trying to play in a certain arena, and I just kind of let my mind go everywhere.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Josh. Like I said, I can hardly wait to get back to reading it. You had put the idea of Deeper Than Hell on the shelf, like you said before. You said you pared a lot of it out, that you did a lot of rewriting and you cut down a lot of what you felt was the fat. Was it difficult to go back and do that on something that you had written so long ago?
Hell yeah. I was telling my wife, like, when I first went back, I hated it. And, the first I was, oh my God, I was like, what have I done? Like, what is wrong? You change a lot as a writer in 5 or 6 years. So it was really hard. But at the same time, like I had to kind of like, ease up on myself. You're your own harshest critic. And it was great having this time, because I actually did. The only major remodeling I did was of one chapter. I basically completely gutted and rewrote one chapter, which was kind of like the weakest chapter all along. It was kind of like
it wasn't chapter 3, was it?
No. This is the Area 51 chapter.
Oh, okay.
It's a real sci-fi trip, man. And it's like the whole book is so predominantly horror. I get into this one like underground military base, Wonderland type setting. And at the time I really was like, I'm out of my depth, just crank something out. So yeah, I did some major remodeling on that on the sci-fi chapter, I'll call it. But no, it was great being able to, again, take my journalism skills, really sharpen everything up, trim all the fat, do that remodeling of chapter 8, just put it all together. And it was great too, kind of, because Deeper Than Hell makes a lot of references to creepypastas and films and things like that. And, some things that happened in popular culture that I was now able to include in it. So I'm kind of glad that I had the chance to revisit it and edit it one last time 6 years later, because now I was able to add things that make it really current.
Well, this is what you were mentioning, Mick Garris, before, and I think most people know that Mick Garris is like Stephen King's favorite interpreter of his works as a director and screenwriter. So I'm going to go ahead and read this quote from Mick Garris about your book. I know if I were you, I'd have this framed and in a big.
Oh, it's tattooed on the back. You want to see?
Yeah, tattooed. There you go. This is what Mick wrote: a dark and deeply observed tale of drugs and dementia. Starting in a grim and grounded world of addiction and melting down into a phantasmagoria of beautifully rendered madness, it's a drug-fueled nightmare that feels too real and not for the faint of heart. That's pretty great praise coming from somebody who's a master of horror, literally, like Mick Garris. So nice going.
It really is. I was so utterly humbled. Just when he said he'd be willing to put it on his to-do list, to give it a read and potentially give me a blurb. I've met Mick Garris a few times, so it wasn't exactly like me just as a stranger asking a master of horror. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and I had worked with him. His podcast, Postmortem Podcast, in my opinion, the number one horror podcast in the world right now is part of the Dread Podcast Network. So, he and I had a chance to work together, on a monthly, sometimes weekly basis. So, I've also been to a few of his events. So, I've met him as a fan. I've worked with him as a teammate. And, now we're both on the same label. I don't know what imprint for our works of fiction.
Right.
So, it's just, it all really lined up. And yeah, he just really humbled me with his assessment, and I really appreciate him. And he's a great guy, like you said, really, really talented interpreter of literature, a skilled filmmaker and writer of fiction, and just a really wonderful guy. Anyone who knows him will tell you so.
Yeah, he's a monster kid too. He is, he's got those roots back with famous Monsters of Filmland and the whole kabang. I wanted to ask you this question because I know you've got a couple of other projects in the works right now, and you're not just resting on your laurels or enjoying this wave without looking for another wave. What kind of effect do you think that having a family is going to have on your future writing, if any? I mean, do you think have you changed at all in the last few years because of having a family? Do you think that's going to influence your writing at all?
Well, it just makes me take it all so much more seriously because, it would be great if I could just do this for the love of it. But ultimately, I need to be able to provide for my family, for my wife, and for my son. So it just makes me, when you want to make something your career, not only do you look to associate with the best, with the people who are most talented, you also hold yourself to that higher standard. So, the fact that I have a family now means that, I'm taking my writing extremely seriously. And it means that, I'm trying to give everyone something that's truly worthy of their attention, whether it's a work of fiction like Deeper Than Hell, or you hinted, so you gave me a perfect segue, a couple of my upcoming projects, because there are two projects that I've got coming down the pike that I'm really excited about. The first, my second book is already in the works, and it's going to be a collection of my interviews from my years working at Dread Central. So it's going to be through Encyclopocalypse. It's nonfiction, and it's going to be, between 50 and 60 interviews with some of the biggest names in horror conducted between 2016 and 2021. I was lucky because of my position at Dread Central, because it was running on kind of like a lean crew at the time, because I took on a lot on my own. I was able to interview just so many people in such a short amount of time. And, it's going to be like a really substantial tome. And it has wonderful interviews, that I've conducted with just some amazing people in horror. And just the fact that that's going to exist offline as its own book, as something that you can, put on a shelf, I'm really excited about that too. And I hope people will. Yeah, and I hope people will of enjoy it too. It really kind of represents a unique time in horror too, because I think with the pandemic and technology, with user-generated content and streaming, I think we're seeing a change in horror journalism. And I think the kind of interviewing I was doing, which was, written, meant to be, written almost in screenplay format, a lot of it's being done more like we're doing right now. So I think you're going to see fewer and fewer, written, transcribed interviews. So, having something that's going to exist like that, I'm just really happy about. And, it's just going to, it's going to be my resume for wherever I go next, because I don't want to, I'm not quitting journalism. I'm just quitting the crazy, insane hours. I'm just doing it on my own terms. And to that end, the other project I'm working on, which I just couldn't be more excited about, which keeps like vying for the front burner of all my attention, even as I have Deeper Than Hell less than a month out. I am so lucky to be writing the authorized biography of Richard Elfman. And I know he's going to be a guest on the show along with his beautiful wife, Anastasia Elfman, on Sunday. I think I'm going to pop in on that party as well. But, I am
That sounds like a party.
It will be a party because that man is a party. That man is one of the most wild, insane, exotic, erotic, crazy creatures I've ever met in my life. And he's a monster kid too, Richard and I met through my work at Dread Central, probably about 4 years now. It was before the pandemic, struck up a friendship before the pandemic. And when I became a family man and I was on paternity leave and I started thinking, what am I going to do next? My writing, how has family changed my writing? This is it, man. I was like, well, I want to do something, with my journalism background. I want to write, a biography, that it seemed like a really natural step for me. And Richard, like I say, is the craziest dude I've ever met in my life, and I'm lucky that he agreed to let me do his biography. And it is in every way an authorized biography, which means I have complete access to the source himself. Let me tell you, no other biographer has enjoyed himself as much as I have, because Richard would invite me over to his house. We had like 6 sessions, each one was between 2 and 4 hours, and he would cook for me. He's a gourmet cook. He would cook for me. And we would sit and I would record and we would drink wonderful wine and whiskey and smoke cigars. And he would just tell me all these amazing stories about the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo and Forbidden Zone. And then the things he did, that people don't know about, his other films, and even his crazy stories about his life as a real estate mogul. You guys are going to freak out when you hear some of these stories. But that guy is just a nut. And, he's been a real supporter of Josh Millican, and I can't wait to be the ambassador of the stories of Richard Elfman, because you guys are going to hear some things you've never heard before, and it's just nuts.
That's fantastic. We're looking forward to that, too. I bet it's just going to be terrific. Hey, there was a nice segue, because I was going to ask you about some of your interviews when you were at Dread Central. And I'm going to throw out some names here, and if you can just maybe answer in just a word or two, or you can go into detail if you want. You can do anything you want, Josh. I don't care.
No, sounds fun.
Okay, so Tommy Chong, is he in the book?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Tommy's great, those who know me know that before the pandemic, I had a short-lived talk show called Chronic Horror.
Loved it.
Kind of put the kibosh on that, but I really dream of revamping Chronic Horror and getting Tommy on as a face-to-face guest.
That would be great.
Yeah, he was fun to interview, and I really feel like he and I made a connection through our 2 interviews, both of which will be in the book.
Oh wow, fantastic. Okay, the Soska sisters.
Again, a few words impossible, because I've been following them. I started as a journalist right around the time Dead Hooker in a Trunk came out, and our careers kind of paralleled each other. Not only that, I had the pleasure of meeting them first time at a convention in Los Angeles, maybe 2015. It was a minute ago.
Oh, wow.
And Jen and Sylvia and I became genuine friends, and they have been so supportive of me every step of the way. And not only do we have an interview with them in my book, I was really thrilled to interview a lot of the cast and crew of Rabid. So you'll learn a whole lot about their remake of David Cronenberg's Rabid, which one of the most underrated films of 2019.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen it, and I agree with that 100%. Robert Englund.
Freddy Krueger. I mean, what can you say?
Dream interview? Was it a dream interview or like a
nightmare interview? No, it was great. Bucket list 100%.
All right. Adam Rifkin.
I mean, what an amazing guy. Just because I'm a bit of a Kiss fan, as people who know me know. So, Detroit Rock City. Not only that, he worked with Dread Central in the sense that our corporate owners, Epic Pictures, released Adam Rifkin's film Director's Cut, which is really kind of like a horror comedy, a meta horror comedy. a great guy. Yes, his interview will be in my book, and I'm also going to be interviewing him for my Richard Elfman biography, because most people don't even know about Bone Chillers, which came out before Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it was a short-lived one-season anthology young adult horror series on Showtime. So you're going to learn more about that in the Elfman biography.
Wow, fantastic. Rob Zombie.
I mean, again, bucket list, and I think what made that one a really kind of heartfelt, that was for Three from Hell. And that was when Sid had passed very recently. And it was still really Sid Haig, and it was still really fresh in, everyone's hearts and everyone's minds. And just having him recount a little bit about the last time that he and Sid Haig spoke, and about how important it was including him in Three from Hell in some way, because you have to get insurance to make films, and Rob was telling me that they almost weren't allowed insurance because of Sid's health. He really insisted that Sid be part of the film. He wasn't going to allow there to be a third Devil's Rejects movie without Sid Haig, without Captain Spaulding. So it was a really wonderful interview. Another bucket list. It's a funny thing, Rob Zombie, half the time I'm walking down the street, people drive by in cars and they yell Rob Zombie at me. It's like I start to look more and more like him the older I get.
That is funny. Well, what's a normal day for you now? I mean,
now
it's centering around family, I'm sure.
It's all about family. I mean, I'm really lucky to have been able to have taken this time off. There was some planning involved. I saved well, and I put aside a little nest egg, and that's allowing me the time to work on things like Deeper Than Hell and the Elfman biography and my collection of interviews. These things I can work on in little spurts. But yeah. It mostly is about my kiddo these days. I just love him to death. And, every day it's kind of like his mom and I just shower him with love and introduce him to the world, and learn as much from him as he learns from us.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, the time has flown by.
It really has.
It really has.
Well, I told for an hour or two.
I picked you as my interview subject. I mean, Jimmy suggested it, but I said, yeah, for sure. I want to interview Josh.
I'm glad you did.
I just think you're a terrific guy, and I think you're a talented, gifted writer, and I'm going to be following your career closely, and I wish you all the best professionally and personally, and you keep riding that wave, bud, because
all right, I'll do my best.
It's a massive one.
Thank you. Josh, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and I hope to see you in person at one of the cons
Let's do it
in the near future. You bet, we will. All right, you take care.